it's becoming easier to sort of market ourselves without having really done anything. And I think we're now sort of sniffing a bit of, that BS when we see it. But oftentimes, we see a lot of people that are just trying to become a thought leader without having done the dirty work, and people trying to take shortcuts and not do the real work of actually making an impact and helping other people achieve success. And I think it's really important, especially for the younger generations, to focus on making an impact, doing a project that will impact other people, focusing on getting something done. Especially for me particularly, I'm passionate about the developing world. And so I focused a lot of my career on that, but really trying to say that you've done something, and not because you just want to say it, but because you want to feel it and internally go through that process of solving a challenge, making other people's lives better. I think that's what makes you an active leader. And I think becoming a thought leader is a byproduct of being an active leader. And so I think more of us need to get back into the trenches, roll our sleeves up, get our hands dirty, and actually focus on making an impact, because we actually become successful by helping other people achieve success.
Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future and CEO of Spyder Works, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and intrapreneurs globally. With me today is Saleema Vellani, an award-winning entrepreneur, keynote speaker, professor, and the author of Innovation Starts with I. At the age of 21, Saleema co-founded and launched Brazil's largest and #1 language school to finance an orphanage and social development programs, which has taught several thousands of students to date. Currently, Saleema and her team at Ripple Impact educate, advise, and connect entrepreneurs who are seeking to increase their influence and maximize their impact. She also teaches design thinking and entrepreneurship at Johns Hopkins University and is a frequent guest lecturer at business schools. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who you want to see us interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. So good morning, Saleema, and welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Good morning, Ken. Thanks for having me on your show.
We talk a lot about passion on Say Hi to the Future, and we talk about a savage curiosity. And I look at your bio and your background, and you have just achieved so much and so many interesting ways, whether it was a language school in Brazil to finance an orphanage, and now speaking and teaching at Johns Hopkins University, lecturing at other business schools, writing, consulting. How do you put these things together? How do you figure it all out?
Great question. So I guess connecting the dots, all the things that I've done have some sort of through line where I feel like I had come as some sort of innovator, some sort of outsider, which is interesting because you don't need to be an expert to innovate. And that's something I talk a lot about in my book that's coming out, Innovation Starts with I, because oftentimes we put a lot of emphasis on becoming a specialist. And today it's actually, I think, with this reinvention revolution that we're currently living through, just given, 2020 being the year of the pivot, and now we're in the September shuffle, it's actually a great time for generalists to rise and have people that have different skills. And someone like me that, really passionate about education, passionate about making a social impact, with the skills of being able to think like an innovator and jump into any sort of situation and solve a problem. I think those skills such as adaptability, resilience, grit, empathy, self-awareness are really key for the future of work that we're already living in right now.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, I think that whether we achieve it ourselves or whether we learn how to surround people who have the different perspectives, the different backgrounds, that to me is just absolutely critical to bringing about change in today's world.
Totally. And I think that, I talk about the future-proof capabilities in my book where, there's 12 of them identified, and they're really key because I feel like there's been a lot of emphasis on skills, but I think that skills can come and go, but capabilities will allow you to sort of use them in different situations. And I think it's to answer your question, I think it's the capabilities that have helped me sort of connect all these dots and be able to jump in and solve these different problems, start different companies, make an impact wherever I can, even if I was not the expert in any of those areas when I started out.
And so when you talk through your book, you say at the end of it, you can expect to walk away with an entrepreneurial mindset. What is that, and how do I achieve it by reading?
Yeah, so the entrepreneurial mindset, it's something that I believe that we need as, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an intrapreneur, you are what I call a hybridpreneur, where you're probably both an entrepreneur and intrapreneur, wearing different hats. Whether you're like a coach or consultant, speaker, author, trying to get yourself out there in the world and your message. And I think that it's becoming increasingly important to have that entrepreneurial mindset, just as we see that blend, it's no longer you have to choose one path of working for an organization or becoming an entrepreneur. It's becoming harder to start, a unicorn sort of company. And so a lot of people are sort of turning themselves into a business or working towards that future business that they have a vision to build when they're, maybe a few years down the line or several years down the line, but they're working towards that. And so I think that entrepreneurial mindset will help us navigate, whether depending, agnostic of where you're working and what type of work you're doing, it will help you thrive just because you'll be able to better navigate difficult situations, just like the uncertainty that we're living in right now with the pandemic. And so I think that the people that have the entrepreneurial mindset were able to adapt more effectively than those who did not. And same with organizations that had leaders and employees that adopted that entrepreneurial mindset were able to adapt. And so yeah, I really think that it's key. And how we define entrepreneurship is also changing. I believe it's not just about starting a business, it's about being able to have the self-awareness to embark on a personal transformation journey.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm kind of that generation where I'll say I'm 55 years old. I've been an entrepreneur for 27 of the 35 years that I've been working. And when I started out, entrepreneurs, we were still thought about as the crazy ones. I remember, undergrad, my first business degree, getting to the end and one of the profs saying, when you get out there, put one foot in front of the other, keep your head down, and 30 years you get a gold watch and a pension. And I thought to myself, wow, that sounds terrible. and today when I hear you speak about it and the need for it, it's entrepreneurism it's becoming almost a core requirement to succeed.
Very much so. And I believe that we have seen so many businesses pop up throughout the last year and a half. And it's just incredible. The numbers have never been this high where, I think it was 40% more applications than, usual compared to like 2019. It was with the 2020 statistic. And it's interesting that more and more people are filing for business applications because they are realizing that they're eventually going to become the entrepreneur of their life, or they need to work towards that. And yeah, that, it helps you sort of future-proof yourself by being agnostic to like where you work, but, figure out how you want to brand yourself, because what you put out there is what you'll attract. And so we see a lot of that happening where people are really trying to take control of their lives and their careers and say, well, this is who I am and these are my values. And they speak from that place.
Yeah. And when I listened to your TED Talk, you spoke about something called the Lifequake. And when you talk now about, is the Lifequake what causes, the need to rethink, or is it the effect, or maybe a little of both?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. The Lifequake, I would say is, and this is Bruce Feiler that I learned this term from his book, Life is in the Transitions, that actually Ariana Huffington recommended to me. And a Lifequake, I think, is, when you are being reactive instead of being proactive and in some sort of reinvention process, because usually we get some signs that it's time to reinvent ourselves. And depending on your intuition and self-awareness and how much you're able to pick up on those signs, when you start seeing those signs, when you're unhappy, you start to feel like you're ready for a change, but you keep staying in something that, isn't really serving you, oftentimes that leads to a Lifequake, such as the one I had when this very home, had a really bad fire. My building had a fire, and I had to, I was displaced, and I had to go figure out, and it was a really terrible time for me. I'd lost my 2 jobs that I thought I had this perfect career, and I was sort of had to start again from a blank slate. And that led me to a eat, pray, self-love trip I took to India, Bali, and Thailand to really figure out who am I, and what's my purpose, and what am I here to do? And it's interesting because I actually, got even more spiraled into this, self-absorbed introspection. Although it was helpful a bit to help feel a bit better, but I had to come back to the real world and, find a job and find a visa. And that led me to the 100 Coffee Challenge, which I also talk about in the book. And I use that methodology as part of my research to interview people, but I had to come back and find a job. And so I had 2 weeks. The immigration officer gave me 2 weeks when I was stuck at Toronto Pearson Airport, and they didn't let me into the United States. And then they said, well, we'll let you in the next day, but we'll give you 2 weeks, and you have to have the right paperwork. Otherwise you won't be going back into the United States. And so I really hustled, and that was me sort of in the middle of my Lifequake trying to solve it. And it was really tough because I had to go through a really hard, process of uncertainty and a lot of stress to find myself and figure out what to do. And luckily I ended up finding an amazing gig to do some work with refugees and hydroponics. And, sometimes Lifequake can be a really difficult thing to go through. No, not everyone has the resilience or the ability to cope with that, because it can be a lot of stress. But sometimes really positive things come out of that, and you develop more resilience in that process. And that was my story. But again, I can also say that you can avoid the intensity of the Lifequake. You can't, sometimes you can't avoid it altogether. You can try to prevent it by being proactive in your reinvention process, by developing these capabilities, by, making a change before you're in a crisis. But ultimately, there's a couple of ways to look at it. And I wouldn't say it's just between positive and negative. It depends on who you are and how well you're able to cope with uncertainty.
Yeah. And when you talk about that, how it's different depending on who you are, where you want to be, what your strengths are, what your desires are. But another thing that you spoke about, though, that I think becomes that wonderful filter, if you will, is that sweet spot mapping, where you get the opportunity to sit back and say, okay, I've been through this. I want to be at a certain place in my life, and how do I figure it out? And the sweet spot maps seem to be a very straightforward tool to help me take stock and take a next step.
Yeah. So the sweet spot mapping tool was actually a practical application that I sort of created after feeling like the Johari window. It's a tool that helps you develop self-awareness by looking at, the areas in which you and other people know who you are, as well as your blind spots, that, areas that other people know you, but you don't really know about yourself. And then areas that you keep to yourself that other people don't know. And then there's this unknown area that are things that, other people don't know about you and that you don't know about yourself. And so I was like, well, how do you actually use this tool? And it was very interesting and intrigued me. But I didn't really have a practical way to apply it. And I was like, what about that unknown area? Like, I want to figure out what's in that unknown area. What are the things I don't know and that other people don't know? And I kind of connected that to innovation, because I was like, well, that's innovation right there, because that's kind of my own story of where I was constantly, in this unknown area. And then I had to figure out what, as I was solving my crises or my problems, I ended up realizing things that I was great at that other people also didn't know that I was great at. And then I turned it into the sweet spot mapping tool, because I was like, well, how do we actually get people to apply this? So it's not just a tool used in, psychology and therapy, and how do we bring this to the innovation world? And so the sweet spot mapping is one of the favorite tools that a lot of people, entrepreneurs, professional pivoters, a lot of people find, career changers find really useful, because it helps you examine yourself in a more using your strengths and looking at the what, and looking at the who versus looking at the why. Because if we look at the why too much, and I love Simon Sinek, but I do believe that starting with why can be very confusing, because not everyone knows their why, and it can change every day depending on your emotion. So I believe that, starting with the what starts from a point of credibility and looking at what you've actually accomplished, and then figuring out, like, what did you excel at? What did other people say you're great at? What are things that you love doing? And then what is that unknown area? What is that area that you're open to testing? What are the projects, the things on the back burner, the ideas that you have, those very things. And I believe that that's where self-innovation starts.
No, it sounds like a wonderful process. And I think that as life quakes and change and reinvention become the norm, I think it's just something that we have to, to take the tool to make it a little bit more inherent or build it into our own capabilities. So thanks for that. And so we're here this morning with Saleema Vellani on Say Hi to the Future, the show about passion and savage curiosity. And Saleema, you've written what I believe is your first book, Innovation Starts with I, and it's a book that took about a 5-year pause. So tell us a little bit about the book and the process in writing it.
Yeah, so I had this idea to write a book many years ago in 2013, 2014, when I was, starting to get interested in entrepreneurship, even though I realized I'd been an entrepreneur before and I had success being an entrepreneur before, but I never really labeled myself as an entrepreneur. So when I came to the US, because I'd always been an entrepreneur outside of the US, when I came to the US, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is really actually cool here to be an entrepreneur. Whereas I was embarrassed about being an entrepreneur because my story of entrepreneurship came from a story of necessity and not being able to find a job during the 2009 financial crisis. And so living in Brazil and Italy, I had to start my own businesses and find a way to survive. And interestingly, I kept it sort of to myself because it was so embarrassing that I couldn't find a job. And then when I came to the US, I realized that entrepreneurship was all the buzz. It was really, cool. And so many people wanted to become an entrepreneur. And there was all this education here on entrepreneurship, workshops, business boot camps, VCs, mentors, angel investors, like all these things were very new to me. And so I went on a journey, at that time in 2013, 2014 to figure out how do I become an entrepreneur again? I was now settled into a full-time job. I had what I thought was the dream career, even though it didn't feel that way. And I was still unhappy inside. And I was trying to figure out how do I help, how do I unleash that entrepreneur within me? And I also was passionate about, well, how do I help all these entrepreneurs unleash that entrepreneur within them too? And so that's kind of when the idea started. And I kept getting stuck though, because I think I was in the middle of my own journey of figuring that out for myself. And that's when that 5-year pause happened. And later, after I figured it out, I was like almost done figuring it out, I came back to the book and I was inspired people were really inspired by my story and impacted by my story. And I had just started, doing a lot of public speaking and getting myself out there and realizing how much impact that had. And it was actually when I was in Liberia that a lot of the entrepreneurs at this innovation workshop, this design thinking workshop that I held at the innovation lab there were like, oh, could I get your autograph? Where's your book? Where's your TED Talk? And I was like, I don't have a book. I don't have a TED Talk. And like, what are these people talking about? And they were inspired by my story, but I didn't really have any way to, a documented version of it that they could take away. And I realized, okay, this is the moment that I need to get this book done. And that's actually in Liberia when I hired my editor and I was like, okay, let's actually make this happen. And I started from then on to really hustle and work on the book. And then the book itself, the journey was quite interesting because I thought I could publish a book within 6 months. Sometimes I'm overambitious. It took 2.5 years, I would say, from when I started around early 2019. And I think the biggest breakthrough that I had was I got stuck writing on my own. And I realized, we make things happen with who, which is, the point of the second part of my book is we start with I. Innovation starts with I, but it happens with we. And I got stuck sort of writing my own insights and stories. And I said, well, let me interview other people. I got inspired by a friend of mine to, interview 100 people, use the 100 coffee challenge, apply it to the book because I was stuck and I was trying to reinvent myself in my book. And it was very interesting because I learned so much. And those interviews became, close collaborators. I made some friends. I, connected with some amazing people, interviewed people like Ariana Huffington, Alex Osterwalder, some really, really interesting people that those conversations actually changed my book because it made me realize that we don't just learn about ourselves by spending time with ourselves. We learn a lot about ourselves through having conversations with other people. And it was then that the book started coming together in pieces. And that's when the book was eventually born, was after the interview process, after doing those workshops around the world and making it a collaborative process.
Yeah, and it sounds like a wonderful way to go about it. I mean, I've always said to people who've asked me, the most important tools in innovation, and I've always said my eyes and my ears, because I'm a visual learner. I love to speak with people, and the first book for me was an experiment, I would say. But after that, to your point, you just have the opportunity to speak to so many wonderful people in so many roles in so many countries. And I just found myself making notes on my whiteboard and circling things and saying, wow, there's 5 things or 10 things that people are saying that they need to understand more about. And I think, like any great innovation, the answer is out there if you're open to hear it. And so I love that you've done the 100 coffees. And so how can people use a 100 coffee challenge in their own personal journey?
Yeah, so I think the 100 coffee challenge is really useful if you are in the process or considering the process of reinventing yourself or your career or your business. Go and talk to people that you know, that you don't know, people that are outside of your industry. And we actually have a free tool that we developed for the 100 coffee challenge. It's available on my website, saleemavellani.com, in the book section. It's under the book resources. And it's essentially a Google sheet, a spreadsheet where you can track those 100 copies and organize them strategically depending on your goals. And so, if you're trying to grow your business and you are in the process of doing business development or sales, you can also use the tool for that. If you are, just trying to build connections and figure out, like, you don't know what you want to do next and you just want to get inspired. I find just talking to people and making it about them and trying to learn as much as possible, apply your curiosity and do research on the person, be really courteous, follow up with them, build those relationships, because it's at the end of the day, business is relationships, and the quality of our life is determined by the relationships we have. And so building new relationships, nurturing existing ones, and building ones that are outside of our comfort zone can take us a long way.
Makes a lot of sense, Saleema. And there's one last thing that that you wrote that I'd like to run by you for the listeners. We don't just need more thought leaders, we need more active leaders. What is the active leader? I mean, it sounds dead on to what we need today, but tell us a little bit about why.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And that's one of the main quotes in my book here on the back of my book is, we need more active leaders, because I got stuck with, I was a bit frustrated that I saw, like, a lot of people trying to become a thought leader, and there was all this. It's becoming easier to market ourselves, and I'm in the world of marketing as well with my business, because we have a business accelerator, but we really work with impact focused leaders, because at the end of the day, it's becoming easier to sort of market ourselves without having really done anything. And I think we're now sort of sniffing a bit of, that BS when we see it. But oftentimes, we see a lot of people that are just trying to become a thought leader without having done the dirty work, and people trying to take shortcuts and not do the real work of actually making an impact and helping other people achieve success. And I think it's really important, especially for the younger generations, to focus on making an impact, doing a project that will impact other people, focusing on getting something done. Especially for me particularly, I'm passionate about the developing world. And so I focus a lot of my career on that, but really trying to say that you've done something, and not because you just want to say it, but because you want to feel it and internally go through that process of solving a challenge, making other people's lives better. I think that's what makes you an active leader. And I think becoming a thought leader is a byproduct of being an active leader. And so I think more of us need to get back into the trenches, roll our sleeves up, get our hands dirty, and actually focus on making an impact, because we actually become successful by helping other people achieve success.
It's a wonderful thought to leave us on, Saleema. And I'll say that I watched your TED Talk. I'm a good way through your book. It's highly motivating. It's highly focusing. And, I think you just leave people with that feeling like, yeah, we can do this. We've got this. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for being on the show today. And again, best of success with Innovation Starts With I. And the book is available for pre-order now, I believe.
Yes, it's available for pre-order, and the official launch date is November 1st, 2021. So it's available on Amazon, on my website, as well as if you want to personally sign copy, it's also available on Indiegogo.
Very good. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ken.